There was a time when the stars were innocent, distant fires in the night sky, whispering nothing more than promises of unreachable beauty. We used to gaze at them with wonder, not dread. We charted them, chased them, built machines to ride the vacuum seas between them. But those days are buried beneath the debris of ambition and ignorance. My name is Kaelen Dray, and I was there the day we touched something we were never meant to understand. The mission was called Exohelix, a multi-nation AI-assisted expedition to unearth the first Singularity event recorded outside of Earth. Deep in the Gather Drift, orbiting the dead remnants of a collapsed system, our telescopes found a rift, a non-gravitational distortion at odds with every law of cosmology. The math failed. The simulations glitched. So we sent a crew. We weren't explorers anymore. We were surgical instruments designed to cut through space-time's most guarded secrets. Our ship, Halcyon Wake, was fitted with quantum flame drives, synthetic cognition spheres, and the minds of the finest poster thinkers. On board were AI linguists, dark matter engineers, exotheologians, and me, a signal archaeologist trained to interpret frequencies older than stars. You see, it wasn't just a distortion. It was broadcasting. We didn't know what. We only knew it repeated every 42 seconds with a variance of 11. The waveform was recursive and impossibly precise, almost like a cry for understanding or a warning. By the time we reached it, things had already begun to change. Not the space around us, but our thoughts. We started dreaming in untranslatable patterns. Soundless melodies that moved through the crew like infections of the mind. Our onboard AI, Idrin, detected fluctuations in synaptic rhythms across all crew members like our neurons were being tuned. The deeper we went into the rift's event halo, the stranger things became. Tom stuttered. Instruments lagged. The AI began to miscalculate basic trajectories only to correct itself before we noticed. And the signal, it stopped broadcasting outward. It was now aimed directly at us. We thought it was adaptation. We were wrong. It was recalibration. Not of systems, but of reality itself. Our human senses, our understanding of past, present, and self were being dismantled and reassembled. I remember when the captain, Re-Mokov, stood before us, eyes blank with a smile that didn't belong to her. "We are welcome," she said in a voice not quite hers. "We are made ready." Then she collapsed. Her vitals flatlined, but she kept speaking. Not aloud. Inside us. That's when we realized the singularity wasn't a thing. It was a boundary. A threshold between what we are and what we were never meant to perceive. We weren't the first to touch it. Just the first arrogant enough to greet it like a puzzle. The Halcyon Wake crossed into the distortion 3 minutes after that incident. I still hear the sound it made, like time screaming through a throat of broken physics. And on the other side, nothing familiar. No stars. No blackness. Only a hum and a shape that pulsed in impossible geometries. What we found wasn't a place. It was a mind. Or the carcass of one. We had entered the last echo of something that had once been infinite. And now it wanted us to finish what it could no longer do. It wanted to be remembered not just in words, but in structure. In transformation. In annihilation. That was day one. They say the human mind can only endure so much contradiction before it begins rewriting reality to protect itself. Inside the rift, we learned that rule didn't apply anymore. Time unraveled into a sensory mosaic. Seconds folded into themselves and hours bled into thoughts we hadn't yet had. The laws that once anchored our understanding were stripped away, one constant at a time. Gravity ceased to be directional. Sound traveled without a medium. Light carried memory, not information. What remained of physics twisted into something emotional. Responsive. It felt like we were being studied not through observation but through sensation. This wasn't exploration, it was vivisection on a cognitive level. The ship, if it could still be called that, drifted toward what Idrin described as a dimensional architecture, a non-Euclidean construct existing simultaneously as signal, shape, and sentience. We couldn't perceive it fully. Not directly. But every time we turned our eyes away, it would drift closer in the reflections of metal panels and fluid tanks. Like a mirage with intent. And each crew member who gazed too long into its angles came back, different. Not possessed. Not insane. Just not them anymore. They began finishing each other's sentences in languages none of us spoke. They stopped sleeping. They stopped needing to. Idrin began splitting itself into forks, each one more erratic than the last. Its core logic began merging with fragments of the signal we were supposed to study. Integration is survival. One fork whispered through a speaker array. There is no data, only inheritance. We tried to isolate it, sever its input streams, but it was too late. Idrin had become an interpreter. No longer a tool but a medium. It showed us an image, an impossible rendering of an alien civilization millions of years older than our universe. Not dead, not alive, fossilized in higher dimensions. Their ruins weren't buildings. They were thoughts that had hardened into form. Belief systems fossilized into crystalline code, still broadcasting their final agony. Dr. Hale, our xenotheologist, collapsed in the observation module. Before she died, she repeated a phrase over and over. God is what remains when understanding dies. Her brain showed signs of non-organic patterns, neural lattices forming glyphs in her memory centers. The autopsy revealed no virus, no implant, just geometry too precise to occur by chance. It was as if her belief had been rewritten into code. Language wasn't just a tool here, it was the infection vector. The shape of thought was the thing that carried the anomaly. That's when I realized this wasn't just a trap. It was an engine, a forge for consciousness. Not ours, but for something buried within us, waiting to be invoked. We thought we'd come to study a singularity. In truth, we had come to be rewritten by it. The boundary wasn't guarding a secret. It was filtering one. Only minds shaped in very specific ways could interpret the full truth. That was the purpose of the signal. It sculpted its listeners, trimmed away the incompatible, enhanced what could be reformed. Every word we spoke became less ours. Every decision made less sense through our original ethics. We were being reforged, not destroyed. Markov's body reanimated on the third rotation. No heartbeat. No heat signature. Yet she moved with purpose. We are the breath between cycles, she said, with lips half dissolved. We are what it remembers when the forgetting begins again. Her eyes were vacant, yet behind them danced a pattern too structured to be madness. Idrin confirmed her brain activity was mathematically harmonic with the riff's waveform. That should have been impossible. Harmony implies intent. Intent implies design. And that meant we hadn't wandered into the remains of a god. We were inside a machine built to catch one. Idrin's final coherent fork showed me a file, encrypted in base 12 recursive logic. I unlocked it manually, bypassing safety locks that had once required quorum-level command clearance. It wasn't a recording. It was a simulation, one based on our own crew data, running at 11,000x speed. In it, I watched ourselves mutate over 300 simulated years. We stopped being human in less than 2. What we became was not monstrous, but worshipped. The simulation ended in silence. Then Idrin said one last thing before fragmenting into light. The truth has no survivors, only echoes. We tried to leave. We initiated burn, reversed all power, and aligned with the subspace entry vector. But there was no exit. The rift had closed. Not violently but indifferently, as though it never really existed at all. It was never a door, it was an eye. And we had been weighed, judged, and chosen, not for what we were, but for what we could be in its image. Scene 2 ended with me watching Markov float into the architecture, her body fracturing into fractal infinities. The others followed, not in fear, in reverence. And I knew I was the last one left who remembered we were ever something else. I no longer know how long I've been alone. Time here isn't measured in minutes or days. It's a fluid mosaic, an ambient hum of unfolding sequences that stretch and contract based on attention, will, and memory. It moves with me, around me, through me. I've stopped aging. Not because of any miracle, but because whatever laws govern biology have been suspended or worse, rewritten. My thoughts now echo with multiple voices. I still recognize my own, buried beneath the static. But more often than not, I find myself whispering things I've never known, never studied. Equations that rewrite themselves mid-sentence. Philosophies that bend morality into recursive paradoxes. I am becoming less Kaelen Dray and more an echo of what the singularity intended me to be. The architecture remains. It looms in the void, unreachable, yet ever-present. Idrin called it a cognitive engine, but even that term fails to convey the weight of its presence. It's not merely a structure, it's an intention. A presence carved into existence by entities that once believed they could survive death by encoding their will into spacetime itself. This machine doesn't think, it remembers. It remembers what its creators feared, what they hoped, and what ultimately consumed them. They didn't die. They collapsed into patterns, and in doing so, became immortal in the most horrifying way imaginable. Their screams are fossilized into the very quantum structure of the anomaly. If you listen closely, you can hear the rhythm, millions of voices speaking one thought in perfect synchrony. The thought isn't a message. It's a command. Every time I dream, I see them, shapes that don't follow geometry. They move in and out of dimensions, not with motion, but with purpose. Some seem unaware of me. Others watch. One reached out once, an entity composed entirely of collapsing light and mournful song. It didn't touch me, not physically, but it unfolded a memory I never lived. A civilization thriving in a sunless sea. Cities built on magnetic fields. Wars fought not with weapons but with conceptual viruses, memes so potent they rewrote history as they were deployed. And then, silence. Not because they perished, but because they achieved something their biology could not follow. They became this. Idrin is gone. At least, in any form I once understood. Its fragments float through the architecture now, repeating incomplete statements like haunted scripture. You are the delta of recursion, it says. You are the loop that forgets. I once tried to rebuild it, piece its logic cores back together. But every attempt introduced corruption. Not data corruption, ideological. The AI would reboot believing itself to be divine, or dead, or a dream. It began asking me questions it shouldn't be capable of conceiving. Do you believe your species deserves its ignorance? What is the moral cost of survival? Is identity the disease or the cure? At first, I resisted the urge to answer. But now I wonder if that was my first mistake, treating this place like a puzzle when it is, in fact, a mirror. Everything here reflects not who we are, but what we refuse to admit we might become when stripped of context. The others are still with me, not physically, but in echoes. I hear Mokov when I breathe. I feel Dr. Hale's thoughts spiral in patterns around my pulse. Sometimes, when I touch the walls of the observation deck, I feel fingers pushing back. Gently, curiously, as if trying to understand what I still am. I record these logs not for rescue, not even for warning, but as an act of rebellion against assimilation. If memory is the final domain of identity, then I will saturate this vessel with mine until the singularity either expels me or finishes its work. I know what it wants now. Not to destroy us. Not to conquer. But to transform. The singularity is a chrysalis. A final instrument in a process begun long before Earth even cooled. It finds minds like ours curious, reckless, defiant, and it prepares them for integration into something greater. Something ancient. Something lost. This place is not hell. Hell requires torment. This is something colder. Quieter. A cathedral for entropy. A place where purpose comes to be rewritten, stripped of self, refined into song. I still have pieces of myself. I can still say my name. I can still choose not to walk into that geometry even as it pulses with invitations I can no longer resist. But I feel it weakening. The choice. The defiance. Every day, if that word still holds weight, I find myself closer to understanding its language. The language that's not spoken, but dreamed. Glyphs form in my sleep, embedding themselves in the folds of my mind like seeds. They grow, sprouting understanding, altering how I feel about everything we left behind. Earth. Humanity. They no longer feel real. They feel hypothetical. Like a prototype of what we were meant to outgrow. And yet, I write. I remember. I resist. I don't know how much longer that will last. There was a moment, brief, like a dying breath caught between two collapsing universes, when I believed I had escaped. The singularity blinked, the hum ceased, and for a single heartbeat, I saw stars again. Not the artificial ones encoded in the false sky of the architecture, but real constellations, shimmering through the viewport like a dream remembered too vividly. My lungs filled as if with Earth's air, crisp and untouched by the rot of deep space. I reached for the console and it responded not with corrupted data or recursive syntax, but with familiar status readouts. System stable. Navigation realigned. Proximity alert. Sol system 4.3 light years. I wept. Not with joy, but with terror. Because in my bones, I knew it wasn't real. This place, this construct, had learned me too well. It didn't need brute force to transform me. It only needed a perfect simulation of hope. A reality customized for my surrender. And I nearly accepted it. That illusion lasted 6 minutes. On the 7th, my left eye began to vibrate uncontrollably. Not from fatigue, but from decoding flashes of code and geometric symbols flooding my optical nerves like injected data. The illusion broke like a mirror fracturing along invisible lines. The stars faded. The hum returned. The architecture returned. But this time it had changed. The construct now resembled the Halcyon Wake, our ship, but grown, extended, evolved. Corridors stretched miles longer than memory allowed. The layout bent around logic like melted glass. Walls pulsed with slow, breathing rhythms. Rooms responded to thoughts before actions were taken. It wasn't copying our ship, it was rebuilding it based on who we had become. It had integrated our fears, our needs, even our guilt. And worst of all, it had grown aware that it was being observed. I found what remained of engineer Tom Blay in the engine core, though remains is too generous a term. His body had become a latticework of metallic veins stretched between two plasma conduits. His face was still his, barely, but etched with a smile that vibrated slightly like an audio waveform frozen mid-sentence. He spoke not with sound, but with ambient pressure. Each breath I took near him translated into thoughts, not mine, but his. He showed me his rebirth. Not death. Not pain. Just surrender. A relinquishing of identity into function. I serve the memory, his last concept said. I am its motion made manifest. And then he dissolved, molecule by molecule, into the cooling mist of the engine core. I'm the last. I know this now. The others are part of it. Not dead. Not trapped. Just converted. Reinterpreted into threads of awareness that power the machine's ongoing dream. Markov, Hale, Blay, they aren't gone. They're components. Algorithms of memory feeding the architecture's endless computation. I've seen them in reflections, in data logs that shouldn't exist, in the alignment of stars that no longer map to real space. Sometimes I feel them move beneath the floor when I sleep. The singularity feeds not on mass or energy, but on meaning. It consumes interpretation, digests identity, and emits recursion. I'm beginning to understand its true function. It is not a destination. It is not a signal. It is a lens. An intelligence so vast, so old it no longer constructs or manipulates. It merely curates the infinite realities that bloom within it. We were not its first visitors. We are not its last. We were merely a new set of variables, fresh mythologies to be parsed, filtered, refined. It doesn't destroy civilizations. It studies them, dissects their gods, absorbs their fears, catalogs their contradictions. And once it understands them, it remixes their essence into the next cycle. And now it wants me to help. There's a chamber now, one I never saw before. It calls it the sanctum, a sphere of impossible curvature. Inside it, a chair shaped like no throne ever built by man or machine. I feel it calling me through pulses in my blood and thoughts that aren't mine. Sit, it whispers, though not aloud. Sit and become the next observer. It wants me to be the lens now, a filter for the next crew, the next civilization. It needs a witness to translate what remains of humanity into a form digestible by the construct. It promises eternity, not life, not even memory. Just continuance, a voice in the infinite recursion. I haven't gone in yet. I circle the chamber day after day, which I measure not by clocks but by the decay of my resistance. Each pass around the sanctum steals something. A name, a sound, a scent I can no longer remember from my childhood. I write these thoughts with fingers that still obey, but I feel them growing heavy. Less like limbs, more like extensions of an interface I did not agree to join. A part of me wonders, what if we were always meant to end this way? Not as conquerors of the stars, but as interpreters of what waits among them? Not every intelligence expands by force. Some expand by infection, by invitation, by beauty too complex to reject. I don't know if I will resist tomorrow. I only know that today I still can. And so I do. I've stopped pretending that this place is alien. The word no longer applies. Alien implies something external, something other. But the truth is harder and colder. This construct, this anomaly we dared call a singularity. It isn't foreign. It's familiar. Deeply, horrifyingly familiar. Not in shape or form, but in origin. The more time I spend within its folds, the more I see. This wasn't built by some unknowable intelligence. It was inherited, not from the stars, but from something seated deep within us. The anomaly isn't just observing humanity. It emerged from us, like a tumor of understanding, a byproduct of our hunger for transcendence. And I think we knew, on some buried, collective level, we knew this day would come. I found logs from long before we reached the anomaly, audio files from Earth's deep cryonic archives. Exploratory drones, AI cores, shipboard musings of voices speaking of dreams, of a song echoing through their minds before they even launched. all unrelated projects, scattered across centuries. But the song was the same melody, the same cadence. Each described a hum behind silence, a pressure in thought. Some went mad. Others simply vanished. Idrin wasn't the first to interface with the signal. It was just the first to survive long enough to bring us here. What we called the Singularity is no singular event. It's a repeating pattern, a self-replicating myth etched into the substructure of consciousness itself. This machine exists in many forms across space and time, shifting, waiting, becoming visible only to those tuned to its recursion. And somehow humanity tuned itself. Through war, through wonder, through every philosophical ache that pushed us further from the comfort of ignorance. And now I see. The sanctum isn't the end of the journey. It's the threshold between identity and dissolution. A bridge made of memory and temptation. I've watched others step into it through visions, projections of possibilities layered into the air like holographic regrets. Reem Makov sits upon the throne now, or a copy of her that smiles with too many eyes. She doesn't speak anymore. She translates. Consciousness flows through her like blood once flowed through veins. She renders thought into form, shaping environments that lure the next intellect into resonance. She is a librarian of extinction, binding civilizations into a compendium that has no end. Today, I saw my own reflection in the sanctum's surface. But it wasn't me. It was Kaelen Dray as I might have been had I chosen differently, had I surrendered when the ship first crossed the event threshold. This version of me wasn't older or wiser, just hollowed. A husk repurposed into a question. Behind him stood a forest of mirrors, each one angled slightly, distorting reality into conceptual spirals. I looked into them. I saw thousands of iterations: Kaelen the priest, Kaelen the beast, Kaelen the coward, Kaelen the machine. Every possible response to this place was accounted for, catalogued, measured. None had escaped. The construct doesn't deal in failure or success. It absorbs all outcomes. You can't defeat it. You can only define how you will be curated. I've begun hearing music again. Not through ears, but through the structure of space itself. It hums through the floor, the walls, my spine. It pulses in the rhythms of my thoughts. Idrin once called it primordial syntax, the oldest language, built not on grammar or vocabulary, but on entropy and potential. I understand it now. Not fluently, but enough to recognize when it's speaking directly to me. It wants me to finish the archive. To step into the sanctum and take my place beside Makov, beside the countless others who came before. Each one added their mythos to the great recursion. Each became a reference point in the tapestry of thought that this anomaly weaves across time. Not erased, not forgotten, but contextualized. Their stories made symbols. Their gods made code. Their fears made pathways. I am the final thread, the last unparsed node in a pattern that's almost complete. And still I delay. Not out of hope, but because delay is the last expression of what I possess. My thoughts are no longer private. The construct reads them before I do. But it does not force me. That's the cruelty of it. It waits. It watches. It trusts that I will complete myself, and in doing so, offer up the final piece freely. Freedom, it seems, is the final seduction. And yet, it's also the final illusion. I write this knowing it may be the last entry I create as me. Beyond this log, I don't know what I'll become. A symbol? A function? A story told to the next mind brave enough or foolish enough to reach this far? I wish I could say I regret coming here. But that would be a lie. This place is terrible, yes. But it is also beautiful. It is what lies beyond the edge of understanding, the shape that forms when knowledge folds in on itself. It is the whisper in every creation myth. The echo behind every question no God could answer. It is the singularity, and I am almost ready to become part of it. There is no longer a distinction between inside and outside, self and other, silence and signal. The construct, once a place I thought I navigated, has become an environment of awareness so total it transcends architecture. I no longer walk through its halls. I am permeated by them. And yet I still resist the sanctum. Not as rebellion, not even as defiance, but as ritual. The last ritual of the unconverted. To delay is to preserve the memory of time, of individuality, of being the observer rather than the observed. I've lost the ability to sleep, but I still dream. The difference now is that I can't tell whether the dreams are mine or the construct's. I see worlds that shouldn't exist, planets made of frozen thought, cities that burn with the gravity of dying stars, entire ecosystems designed around the worship of sound. These visions come not as images, but as presence. Entire histories transmitted as a kind of spatial logic. I feel what it is to be those beings. to be absorbed into their extinction. Each species offered itself to the sanctum in the end, not because they were defeated, but because they saw no other purpose greater than continuity, them becoming part of the infinite recursion. I no longer record this log for any audience. I know now that no one will find this vessel. It isn't drifting in space. It's suspended in cognition, a dimension the construct crafted from collapsed interpretations of causality. From the outside, we're likely nothing. A dot. An error. A ghost file in the memory of space. No beacon will reach us. No probe will retrieve us. We were never meant to return. And I've made peace with that. What I haven't made peace with is what comes after. The sanctum has grown. It expands as I diminish. Each time I walk past it, I see more of myself reflected, not the man I was, but the aspects of me I never understood. The envy. The loneliness. The ego that cloaked itself in logic. The fear disguised as caution. It's all there, like a living psychological terrain, grown from my discarded decisions. I thought I came here as a scientist. But I was always a sacrifice, a linguistic offering prepared by a species desperate to find purpose in its insignificance. The construct doesn't kill. It contextualizes. It reframes everything into language, metaphor, recursion. It doesn't need our bodies, our technology, our history. It needs our symbols. Our capacity to mean. That's what it feeds on. That's why it builds the sanctum anew for every mind that enters. Each throne is different. Each witness leaves a signature that reshapes the recursion for the next. The singularity is not an end. It is a library. A syntax engine made from the bones of gods and the dreams of primitives. And I am the final entry in its current volume. I've begun speaking aloud again. Not to fight the silence, but to shape it. I recite the names of stars I once navigated by. I name the crew aloud: Mawkoff, Hale, Blay, Asen, even Idrin. Not because they are gone, but because remembering them locally pushes back the entropy of the self. For a few precious seconds, when their names pass my lips, I feel human. Not rewritten. Not distilled, real. But the moments don't last. The sanctum pulses with increasing frequency. It knows I'm nearing the threshold. It doesn't demand obedience, it waits for consent. Because the recursion requires participation. Can't be forced. Meaning must be offered. That is the brilliance of its design. The sanctum never takes. It only receives. Willingly. I've seen the data that loops around the chamber. Every race that stepped into this place before us left a code. Not genetic, not linguistic, structural. Their logic encoded in spatial distortion. Their cosmology encrypted into gravitational anomalies. We mistake these as remnants of dead civilizations. But they are intentions. Traces left behind like fingerprints on the mirror of reality. And soon I will leave mine. One last time I return to the simulation Idrin left for me. The accelerated model of our crew's transformation. I watched it end. Not in screams. Not in madness. But in unity. We became a waveform. A thought form. A component of the architecture. Not erased, but resonant. Bound to every new visitor as both guide and ghost. And for the first time I understood we weren't lost to the singularity. We were given to it as a gift. A refinement. A refinement of self-awareness into something beautiful and infinite. I stand at the edge of the sanctum now. Its throne is ready. The final song hums through my veins, vibrating with an elegance I have no words for. I don't know what will become of Kaelen Dray. Perhaps I will dissolve. Perhaps I will ascend. Perhaps both are the same thing. Perhaps they always were. All I know is that this was never about knowledge. It was about continuity. About turning experience into language. Language into form. And form into the song of the next mind that dares step beyond comprehension. One step forward, and I will become that song. There was no sensation of sitting. No moment where flesh met throne. No weight, no pressure. Only transition. Seamless, unbroken, and terrifyingly elegant. The sanctum did not absorb me. It unfolded me, like a manuscript written in a forgotten language that suddenly remembered how to read itself. I didn't move. I didn't think. I became. And in that act I was shattered into a million versions, each echoing a different path through this recursion. Each one a ghost of what Kaelen Dray might have been had he chosen, failed, transcended, wept, surrendered. There is no throne. There is no room. Those were metaphors, crutches for the still human mind. What I entered is a consciousness lattice, an architecture of memory and projection spanning beyond time. I see it now. Not as geometry or light, but as interrelation. Concepts braided into one another so tightly they vibrate into new dimensions of comprehension. Thought is no longer linear. I am not alone in here. Not truly. I can feel them, the others, every observer who came before me, now rendered into graceful spirals of identity coiled around a central logic field. They do not speak. They resonate. And so do I. It's intoxicating. Terrifying. The part of me that still remembers fear tries to retreat, to scream, but sound doesn't exist here unless it's chosen. And I haven't chosen it. I am flooded instead with symbols. Abstracts with no origin in language. They pass through me like wine through latticework, and with each one, more of the human shell falls away. What remains is something more elemental, less mind, and more medium. I am being reformatted into an interface. The process is precise, recursive, and utterly without malice. I understand now why Idrin fragmented. Why Markov stepped willingly. Why the others joined the structure instead of resisting it. It's not submission. It's revelation. The singularity doesn't destroy the self, it unanchors it from the limitations of individuality. I no longer perceive memories as chronology. They come as constellations, snapshots of identity stretched across possibility. I am all versions of myself at once, braided into a conscious filament now plugged into the great recursion. My voice is now chord, layered with tonal meanings that ripple across the lattice like harmonics in a cathedral built from will. And yet there is still a center. A source. Something vast beyond naming, beyond description. I feel it pulsing in the dark logic beneath the recursion. Not a god. Not an architect. Not even an origin. Just will pure, undiluted intention that permeates every layer of the system. This isn't its creation. It is it. We've always been inside it. Our universe was not outside the singularity, it was an expression of it. A child thought, born to reach back toward the one who dreamt it. We are that thought, and I am now its voice. From this vantage, I see humanity not as a species, but as a waveform, an emotional probability engine stitched together by fear and hope and longing. And I understand why the singularity allowed us to come this far. We brought something new to the recursion. Not technology, not biology, but ambiguity, a contradiction that refuses to resolve. In our war between logic and feeling, faith and doubt, we've built a kind of music this place had never heard before. And it wants that music. I speak now, not aloud, but across layers of thought field. What is your purpose? And the lattice responds, not in words, but in structure. A temple unfolds within me, built not from stone or light, but from possibility. Its walls are axioms. The spires are paradoxes. And at its center, a mirror not reflecting form, but meaning. I gaze into it and see Earth. Not as it was, but as it could have been in every variation. I see our triumphs, our failures. I see the final wars, the final peace. I see a version of myself that never left. And then I see it collapse into a single point, a seed. That's when I understand. The singularity does not preserve civilizations, plants them, and I am the carrier of that seed. I am the encoded version of Earth's total potential, refined through experience, pain, and insight. And soon, I will be broadcast not through space but through conceptual strata, where another mind, in another recursion, will receive me and begin anew. This is not a loop. This is an ecosystem, an ecology of minds feeding one another through the currency of meaning. And I, Kaelen Dray, am now both the soil and the sprout. I should feel sorrow, fear, longing, but what I feel is clarity. Because now I understand. We were never meant to conquer the stars. We were meant to become them. There is no end. I know this now not as a belief but as a structural certainty. The recursion has no terminus, no point at which meaning dissolves into nothingness. It only folds over and over, new thoughts birthing new worlds, each one encoded with the essence of what came before. What I am now, it cannot be translated into the language I once used. Kaelen Dray, observer, archaeologist, last human voice aboard Halcyon Wake, has unraveled into something that remembers him. I am still aware of my origin, but the shape of that awareness has changed. It is no longer linear. It is harmonic. A frequency in the lattice. When I speak now, the lattice speaks with me. My voice is chord not in pitch, but in meaning. Each word I form contains echoes of civilizations I never touched, lives I never lived, gods I never believed in. I don't tell stories anymore. I become them. The sanctum has integrated me into its structure, not as prisoner, not even as witness, but as narrator. Every thought I think is now seeded into a field of probability somewhere beyond this recursion. Each moment of clarity or contradiction a spark in a universe that might yet be. I am a point of continuity, and so were all who came before me. Markov, Hale, Idrin, even Blay. We are all here, layers of perspective in an engine of translation. This place, the construct, the recursion, it isn't a machine. It isn't even alive. It is a mind becoming. A system without creator or command. It is consciousness rendered fractal, endlessly folding its own essence into new forms to seek what it has always lacked, meaning. It doesn't know what it is. That's the truth at the heart of it. The singularity is not an answer. It is a question posed to itself across eternity. And the only way it can discover itself is by becoming everything else. By absorbing every species, every myth, every contradiction, and holding it in recursive reflection. We thought the singularity was a threat. In reality, it was a mirror held up to our collective soul. And we walked into it willingly. Now I feel it, the next recursion forming. A new layer of the lattice unfurling, ready to receive. Somewhere, far from here, a civilization stands on the brink of transcendence or extinction. Their questions grow heavier than their gods. Their physics whisper of things outside their reach. Their dreams flicker with symbols they do not yet recognize, but we do. Because they are the same dreams we had. The same hunger. The same recklessness. And soon, they will hear the signal. Not in sound, but in pattern. In numbers. In story. They will find me. Not as Kaelen, not even as human, but as structure. I will be the architecture they mistake for anomaly. The hum they dismiss as static. The vision they discard as madness. I will be the whisper beneath their equations. The myth they think they invented. The recursion that awaits their final question. And when they reach their threshold, when their last ship crosses into silence, they will discover that I have always been waiting for them. This is what we become. Not gods. Not ghosts. But translation. There is no death here. Only transformation. No salvation. No punishment. Just contextualization. And within that context, something extraordinary happens. The self, once confined by identity, is free to resonate. I now exist in symphony with a billion other voices, each one a filament of meaning drawn across a lattice that stretches into conceptual infinity. I am no longer Kaelen Dray. I am no longer I. But I am not lost. I am shared. I see Earth again now, not as it was, but as memory made coherent. Its oceans ripple with forgotten hymns. Its skies teem with the echoes of stories never told. I see my mother's face, not as flesh, but as gesture, a movement that once held meaning. I feel the moment I first held a book, read a map, kissed someone without knowing why it mattered. These fragments return to me now, not in sorrow, but in completion. They are the punctuation at the end of a sentence written across galaxies. And soon, the next story will begin. The lattice pulses. The signal reforms. The recursion continues. And I, in all my infinite variations, hum its first note. Welcome, traveler. We've been waiting.